Before the rise of modern medicine, death was not viewed as a failure. You know, it was seen as a transition, a sacred passage into another form of existence. Communities gathered to honor it, not resist it. You know, but with the medicalization of death came a shift. What was once spiritual became clinical. What was once communal became institutional. And what was once accepted became feared. You know, the hospital replaced the home. Machines replaced ritual. And the goal shifted from understanding death to avoiding it at all costs. Eh? The medicalization of death redefined the meaning of dying. Medicine, with its life-saving triumphs, began to view death as an enemy to be defeated rather than a natural closure of life's cycle. And in doing so, dying became a medical event that is managed by professionals, surrounded by sterile instruments, and measured in vital signs rather than meaning. You know, families were displaced from the process, and death became something to be treated instead of experienced. This shift created a paradox. The more medicine advanced, the more people began to fear death. Instead of preparing spiritually or even emotionally, people began to depend on medical interventions to delay the inevitable. What was once an intimate collective experience transformed into a lonely struggle surrounded by machines and fluorescent lights. You know, the rituals that once brought comfort, that is the songs, farewells, ancestral blessings. In our culture, we say we celebrate the life of the person who's passed. We don't mourn their death. We celebrate their life. You know, all these were replaced by tubes, charts, and even procedures. Psychologically, the medicalization of death disconnects humans from the acceptance of mortality. The very acceptance that gives life its depth. You know, when death is viewed as a failure rather than fulfillment, then individuals develop an unconscious fear of it. And this fear drives anxiety, denial, and even excessive attachment to life extension treatments. And often at the cost of dignity. You know, the dying person becomes an object of medical management rather than a subject of sacred transformation. Grief too has become medicalized. Instead of collective mourning rituals, jele ndo hiyo sasa. Aya, wacha nimalize. Instead of collective mourning rituals that allowed emotional processing, society now encourages avoidance, sedation, distraction, or even quick closure. You know, this avoidance keeps people trapped in unresolved grief and existential fear. Facing death consciously, on the other hand, brings psychological integration. A peace that comes from understanding that life and death are not opposites, but partners in existence. You know, spiritually, death has always been a teacher. It reminds us of impermanence and invites us to live with awareness and humility. When cultures viewed death as a rite of passage, the soul's journey was guided with honor. Rituals ensured continuity between worlds, and ancestors were seen as living presence. You know, but when medicine took over, this bridge was severed. Death became an interruption, not a continuation. By medicalizing death, humanity traded transcendence for control. You know, yet the spiritual truth remains, death is not the end, but a return. A shading of form and a merging with the source. You know, the more we resist it, the more restless our souls become. The healing at the end of life is not about prolonging breath, but about aligning spirit, body, and even mind in acceptance. You know, in short, the medicalization of death turned a sacred transition into a clinical event, amplifying humanity's fear of mortality. You know, and in trying to conquer death, we lost touch with its wisdom. It is not death that should be feared, but the disconnection from its meaning. To restore peace with dying, we must reclaim its sacredness, to see it not as an enemy, but as the final teacher. One that reminds us that life's value is not measured in duration, but in depth, in dignity, and even in the grace with which we return to the source. My people, heal. Heal.